Ambassador Veltar pressed her thin fingers against the cool metal of her desk and stared at the holographic display floating before her. Red dots marked the dead systems. 12 of them now. 12 entire star systems where millions of her people had once lived, worked, and raised their young. All gone, all consumed. The Krek swarm moved like a plague across the galaxy. They ate everything organic, turning living worlds into empty husks of rock and metal, ships, stations, even the wooden furniture in children's bedrooms. Nothing escaped their hunger. The worst part was how they did it. The Kreks didn't just kill, they absorbed. Every person consumed became part of their hive mind, adding their memories and knowledge to the collective before their consciousness disappeared forever. Veltar's species, the Zephyrians, had never been warriors. Neither had their allies in the Coalition, the gentle Harath with their flower-like faces, or the scholarly Vin who spent their lives studying the stars. All three species had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation meant survival. They had no weapons of war, no killer instincts, no understanding of the brutal mathematics of extinction. She looked up as the door to her office slid open. General Kethamor of the Harath military walked in, his usually bright petals now wilted with exhaustion. Behind him came Scholar Prime Zixtal of the Vin, her large eyes reflecting the same despair that had haunted all their meetings for weeks. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" Veltar asked, though she already knew the answer from their expressions. Kethamor's petals drooped further. "They refuse to send aid. They say our systems are too far from the core worlds to justify the risk." The human ambassador was more direct. He called it a lost cause and suggested we evacuate to refugee camps in Centauri space. "Refugee camps," Zixtal repeated bitterly. 3 billion beings reduced to refugees because no one wants to fight a war they might lose. Veltar felt something break inside her chest. 3 billion. That was all that remained of their coalition. 3 billion souls depending on her to find a miracle when none existed. The largest military force they could gather had maybe 200 ships. The Krek swarm numbered in the thousands, and they grew stronger with every world they consumed. "What about the Altarian Empire?" she asked desperately. "The Nexus Confederation? Someone must be willing to help." "The Altarians closed their borders yesterday," Kethamor said. "They're too afraid the swarm will follow us to their space. The Confederation offered to take our historical archives and preserve our culture after we're gone." Veltar stood and walked to the window that looked out over New Zephyr, the Coalition's capital world. Below, families went about their daily lives, unaware that their government had exhausted every option. Children played in the parks, vendors sold food in the markets. Artists painted murals on the walls of buildings that might not exist in a month. "There has to be someone," she whispered. "Someone we haven't asked." Zixtal consulted her data pad. "We've contacted every major power in the galaxy. The Krek swarm has been expanding for 30 years. Everyone knows what they do. No one wants to face them." "What about the minor powers, the independent worlds?" "Most don't have the military strength to help. The ones that do are too far away." Zixtal paused, her large eyes focusing on something in her data. "There is one option we haven't explored." "What is it?" "The Deathworld species database." Zixtal's voice dropped to a whisper. "Species that evolved on worlds so dangerous that contact is restricted." Veltar felt her blood chill. Every civilized being in the galaxy knew about Deathworlds, planets so hostile that only the most savage creatures could survive there. The species that emerged from such places were considered unstable, violent, and unpredictable. There were strict protocols about contact with them. "How many Deathworld species have achieved spaceflight?" she asked. 17 confirmed. Most are isolated in their home systems, too dangerous to interact with galactic society. Zixtal's fingers moved across her pad. But there's one exception. A species called humans from a Class 12 death world designated Earth. Class 12. Veltar. Had never heard of a world rated that high on the danger scale. Most death worlds barely reached Class 7. What makes their world so dangerous? Zixtal read from the file. Extreme weather variations, tectonic instability, aggressive predator species, toxic plant life, disease organisms, radiation exposure, gravitational stress, atmospheric pressure variations, corrosive ocean chemistry, electromagnetic interference, multiple extinction events, and... She paused. Confirmed apex predator intelligence. Apex predator intelligence? Kethmore's petals had gone completely white. You mean they're evolved killers? According to this, humans evolved from persistence hunters. They would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their world was so dangerous that they had to become the most dangerous thing on it just to survive. Veltar sat back down heavily. Asking apex predators for help felt like inviting demons to fight demons. But what choice did they have? What do we know about their current status? They've been spacefaring for about 200 years. They have colonies in several systems near their homeworld. The Galactic Council maintains minimal contact, mostly trade agreements for rare minerals they mine from asteroids. There are warnings in their file. What kind of warnings? Zixtal's voice became even quieter. Psychological instability, tendency toward violence, unpredictable emotional responses, capability to weaponize nearly anything, disregard for conventional warfare doctrine, high tolerance for casualties, including their own. They sound terrible, Kethmore whispered. They sound desperate enough to fight the Kreks, Veltar said. A terrible idea was forming in her mind. If they're truly apex predators, maybe they're the only species crazy enough to face the swarm. Veltar, no. Zixtal leaned forward. The psychological profiles suggest humans are barely contained savages. Bringing them here could be as dangerous as the Kreks. Could be, but the Kreks will definitely kill us all. Veltar pulled up the communication array. How do we contact them? There's a quantum relay station at the edge of their space. But Veltar, please reconsider. The cultural analysis says humans form pack bonds and respond to violence with greater violence. They might demand payment we can't afford, or worse, they might decide we're threats too. Veltar looked out the window again. A group of Harath children were drawing pictures with colored sand in the park. Their innocent laughter drifted up through the air filters. In the market, an elderly Vin was teaching a young Zephyrian how to carve traditional patterns in wood. These people trusted her to protect them. Draft a message, she said. Make it honest. Tell them exactly what's happening. Veltar, do it. Zixtal's fingers moved reluctantly across her pad. What should we offer them in return? Nothing. Both her companions stared at her. Nothing? Kethmore asked. If they're as savage as the reports say, offering payment might make them think we're trying to hire mercenaries. That could insult them. If they're pack animals like the analysis suggests, maybe they'll respond to a simple request for help. Veltar moved to the communication console and began typing. The words came slowly, each one weighted with the fate of billions. To the human species of Earth. We are the Zephyrian Coalition. We are dying. A species called the Krek Swarm is consuming our worlds. They have destroyed 12 star systems. 3 billion of our people depend on our next decision. We have asked every major power in the galaxy for help. All have refused. We know humans are considered dangerous. We know your world is classified as hostile. We know the Galactic Council warns against contact with your species. But we are out of options. She paused, thinking of the children in the park. Our children are being consumed, turned into part of a hive mind that knows no mercy, no peace, no individual thought. If there is any mercy in your species, if you understand what it means to fight for survival, please help us. We don't know what you might want in return. We don't know if we can afford your price. But we're asking anyway, because sometimes desperation is all the courage you have left. Veltar encrypted the message with their diplomatic codes and attached their star charts, military assessments, and everything they knew about the Krek swarm. Then she looked at her two closest advisors. "Are you certain about this?" Zixtal asked. "No, but I'm certain about what happens if we do nothing." She pressed the transmission key. The message shot across space at faster-than-light speed, carrying with it the hopes and fears of 3 species who had run out of time. The response came 18 hours later, just 4 short lines that appeared on every screen in the coalition. Government simultaneously. Message received. Situation understood. Ship en route. Prepare for unconventional assistance. Captain Sarah Chen, UES Retribution. Veltar stared at the message for a long time. UES Retribution. Even the name sounded dangerous, but buried in those brief words was something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected something approaching Coalition space. A single ship, moving fast and broadcasting human identification codes. Veltar ordered all defensive fleets to stand down and prepared to meet their saviors, or their doom. She still wasn't sure which it would be. The UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory with all the grace of a falling asteroid. Long-range sensors had detected its approach for hours, but seeing it with their own eyes left the Coalition fleet commanders speechless. Captain Veltar stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship, watching the human vessel through the main view screen. It looked like something that had crawled out of a starship graveyard and decided to keep flying anyway. The hull was a patchwork of different metals and alloys, clearly salvaged from dozens of different ships. Weapon mounts had been welded onto surfaces never meant to carry them. Massive industrial equipment jutted from the sides like mechanical tumors. "By the 7 suns," whispered Admiral Korthek beside her. "What is that thing?" Fleet Coordinator Zixtal checked her sensors. "It's registering as a cargo vessel, a salvage ship, according to their transponder. But those energy readings?" She looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, that ship is putting out more power than our entire battle fleet." The communications array crackled to life. A voice spoke in accented but understandable Galactic standard, rough and direct in a way that made Veltar's skin crawl. "Coalition fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution. We're here about your bug problem, requesting permission to come aboard your flagship for tactical discussion." Veltar exchanged glances with her officers. The human had called the Krek swarm a bug problem, as if a force that had consumed 12 star systems was just an inconvenience. "Permission. Granted, Captain Chen. Docking Bay 7 is prepared for your shuttle." "No shuttle needed. I'll take a transport pod." "Fair warning. My ship doesn't carry the pretty diplomatic shuttles you're probably used to." 20 minutes later, Veltar stood in the docking bay watching a small pod lock onto their docking clamps. It looked like an escape pod that someone had strapped engines to. When the airlock opened, the first thing that hit her was the smell. Oil, metal, and something else she couldn't identify. Something sharp and dangerous. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through the airlock, and Veltar immediately understood why humans were classified as apex predators. The woman was tall and lean, moving with the controlled grace of something that could explode into violence at any moment. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes were the color of winter storms. Scars marked her hands and face, not the neat surgical scars of medical procedures, but the ragged marks of someone who had survived things that should have killed her. Behind her came 2 other humans. One was a massive man, whose arms were covered in what looked like decorative scars arranged in patterns. The other was smaller, wiry, with the pale skin of someone who spent their life in space. All three wore clothes that looked functional rather than formal. Heavy boots, practical pants, shirts that could handle hard work. Ambassador Veltar? Chen's voice was direct, businesslike. Captain Sarah Chen. This is my tactical officer Marcus Webb and my chief engineer Riley Santos. We need to talk strategy. Veltar had prepared diplomatic pleasantries, formal greetings, careful protocols, but something in Chen's manner suggested the human had no patience for ceremony. Of course. We've prepared a briefing room. Good. But first I need to be clear about something. Chen's storm-colored eyes fixed on Veltar's face. You called for help from Deathworlders. That means you're going to get Deathworlder solutions. We don't fight wars the way civilized species do. We don't follow the standard rules of engagement. We don't worry about fighting fair or keeping things clean. If that's a problem, say so now. Veltar felt ice in her veins. What do you mean by not clean? I mean we're going to do whatever it takes to stop the swarm. Things that might make your people uncomfortable, things that other species would call brutal or excessive. Chen's expression never changed. The question is whether you want to win more than you want to keep your hands clean. Admiral Korthek stepped forward. Captain Chen, we appreciate your willingness to help, but surely there are galactic conventions. Chen turned her winter storm gaze on him. Admiral, how many ships did you lose the last time you tried to fight the Kreks using galactic conventions? Korthek's silence was answer enough. In the briefing room, Veltar watched Chen study their tactical displays with the focused intensity of a natural killer. The human asked sharp questions about Krek's biology, their ship construction, their movement, patterns. Her two officers took notes on devices that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts. Your intelligence is good, Chen said finally, but incomplete. You're thinking about this like a conventional war. The Kreks aren't conventional. They're a cancer. You don't negotiate with cancer. You don't fight it fairly. You cut it out completely. What are you suggesting? Veltar asked. Chen activated her own display device, projecting images that made several coalition officers gasp. The Retribution's interior looked like a nightmare of improvised weapons and jury-rigged equipment. Mining charges had been converted into ship killers. Industrial cutting tools had been modified for combat. Cargo holds had been turned into manufacturing bays for things Veltar didn't want to identify. We're a salvage ship, Chen explained. We go into dangerous places and bring back things other people can't or won't handle. Dead ships, unstable artifacts, contaminated materials. My crew consists of people who are too dangerous for regular service, but too valuable to waste. She gestured to her tactical officer. Webb's massive frame was covered in scars that told stories of violence survived. Marcus used to run with pirate fleets before he decided he wanted to kill pirates instead. He knows every dirty trick in the book because he invented half of them. Santos grinned, showing teeth that had been replaced with metal implants. Riley here got kicked out of the engineering corps for building weapons that violated about 40 different galactic treaties. Good thing this isn't technically a galactic operation. Veltar felt sick. You're criminals. Reformed criminals, Chen corrected. We work for Earth's Deep Space Operations Division. We handle problems that regular military can't touch. Pirates, who hide in asteroid fields. Rogue AI ships. Alien artifacts that drive people insane. Things that require people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. And you think this qualifies you to fight the Kreks? Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut. Lady, we specialize in killing things that shouldn't exist. The Kreks are just another Tuesday for us. She activated another display, showing the Retribution's crew manifest. Veltar read through it with growing horror. Former pirates, disgraced military officers, asteroid miners, salvage specialists, and individuals whose job descriptions were simply listed as classified. How many of you are there? Admiral Korthek asked quietly. 43 crew members. plus whatever we can jury-rig from the local materials. Chen seemed to enjoy their shocked expressions. I know what you're thinking. How can 43 people fight a swarm that destroyed 12 star systems? The answer is that we're not going to fight them. We're going to make them wish they'd never heard of organic life. Santos pulled up technical specifications that hurt Veltar's eyes to look at. We've got mining charges that can crack small moons, industrial acid designed to eat through starship hulls, electromagnetic pulse generators that will fry any electronics within 50 kilometers, and those are just the conventional weapons. What about the unconventional ones? Veltar asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Webb spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. Biological warfare, psychological operations, environmental manipulation, things that make the enemy wish they were dead long before they actually die. Chen leaned back in her chair. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to hit the Krex advance fleet when they reach the contested system. We're not going to try to outfight them or outmaneuver them. We're going to make them afraid. Fear is something the Krex don't understand, which makes it a perfect weapon against them. The Krex are a hive mind, Zixtal protested. They don't experience individual emotions like fear. No, but they experience collective trauma, pain that affects the entire network, confusion that disrupts their coordination. We're going to hurt them in ways they can't adapt to, because adapting would require them to become something they're not. Chen stood and walked to the tactical display showing the approaching Krex fleet. Fair warning, when this is over, your people are going to have questions about our methods. Some of those questions won't have comfortable answers. The Krex are going to die in ways that civilized species would call cruel. We're going to use their own biology against them. We're going to turn their greatest strength into their biggest weakness. Veltar looked at her advisors, seeing her own doubts reflected in their faces. These humans were everything the warnings had said they would be: violent, unpredictable, willing to cross lines that civilized species wouldn't even approach. But they were also the only people in the galaxy who had looked at the Krex swarm and seen a problem they could solve. Captain Chen, she said slowly, what do you need from us? Stay out of our way. Keep your fleets back unless we specifically call for them. And be prepared for the fact that when this is over, the galaxy is going to know exactly what happens when someone threatens a species under human protection. Chen's smile was cold as deep space. The Krex wanted to be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They're about to learn what actual predators look like. As the humans prepared to leave, Webb paused at the airlock. Ambassador, one more thing. When we engage the Krex, don't try to record the battle for your archives. Some things are better left unremembered. After they left, Veltar stood in the empty briefing room, staring at the tactical displays. In 3 days, the Krex advance fleet would reach the contested system. In 3 days, she would learn whether she had found salvation or invited a different kind of doom into Coalition space. Outside the viewports, the Retribution hung in space like a mechanical predator, waiting for its prey to arrive. The Krex swarm entered the Zephyr 7 system like a plague of living ships. Hundreds of biovessels poured through the hyperspace exit point, their organic hulls pulsing with the rhythm of massive hearts. Each ship was grown rather than built, crafted from the absorbed biomass of countless conquered worlds. They moved with purpose, guided by the collective intelligence that had consumed 12 star systems. Captain Sarah Chen watched them arrive from the bridge of the UES Retribution, positioned behind a small asteroid field at the system's edge. Her crew worked quietly around her, making final preparations for something the galaxy had never seen before. Biological composition confirmed, reported Santos from the engineering station. Hull material is approximately 60% organic. Polymer, 30% mineral composite, 10% metallic infrastructure. They're basically flying creatures with metal skeletons. Perfect, Chen said. Deploy the bacterial packages. The Retribution launched what looked like mining probes, small, unremarkable devices that drifted toward the asteroid field. The Kreks, sensors ignored them completely. Why would a hive mind worry about industrial equipment? Webb monitored the deployment from his tactical station. Packages are in position. Bacterial cultures are stable and ready for dispersal. Chen had spent 2 days explaining to the Coalition Command why this would work. The Kreks ships were living tissue. Living tissue could get sick. Earth had spent billions of years developing bacteria that could break down organic matter. The Retribution carried samples of Earth's most aggressive decomposer organisms, carefully modified to work faster and spread further than nature ever intended. "What's the dispersal method?" Admiral Korthek had asked during the briefing. "We're going to sneeze on them," Chen had replied with a straight face. Now, as the Kreks fleet moved deeper into the system, Chen activated the first phase of her plan. The mining probes exploded, but instead of producing fire and shrapnel, they released clouds of microscopic organisms into space. The bacteria spread through the vacuum, designed to survive in the cold and seek out organic compounds. The Kreks didn't notice anything wrong for the first hour. Their bioships continued their advance toward Zephyr 7, where Coalition evacuation ships were still loading refugees. But then the microscopic invaders found their targets. "Contact with enemy biohulls confirmed," Santos reported. "Bacterial. Colonies are establishing. Decomposition rate is exceeding projections." Chen smiled grimly. Earth bacteria didn't just eat organic matter. They multiplied while doing it. Each successful infection created millions more bacteria, spreading through the Krek ships like wildfire. The living hulls that had been the swarm's greatest advantage were becoming their weakness. The first Krek ship began showing symptoms 20 minutes later. Its hull started developing dark patches where the bacteria colonies were breaking down, the organic polymers. The ship's movement became erratic as its living tissues began to fail, but Chen wasn't finished. As the bacterial infection spread through the Krek's fleet, she activated the second phase of her psychological warfare campaign. "Riley, start the audio bombardment." Santos grinned and activated an array of powerful speakers mounted on the Retribution's hull. The sound that emerged would have been impossible to hear in the vacuum of space, except that it was broadcast directly into the Krek's ship's communication networks. The hive mind suddenly found itself flooded with sounds it had never encountered before. Whale songs from Earth's oceans, deep and mournful and vast. The collective consciousness tried to process the alien noises and found itself becoming confused, disoriented. The songs seemed to carry emotional weight that the hive mind couldn't understand. Then came the wolf howls, pack calls from creatures that had once been humanity's greatest rivals for dominance on Earth. The sounds triggered responses buried deep in genetic memory, primal fear of predators, panic at being hunted. The Kreks had never experienced these emotions before. They didn't know how to process them. The hive mind's coordination began to break down. Ships started moving in circles, no longer following their formation patterns. Some began firing at empty space, responding to threats that existed only in their collective nightmares. But Chen saved the worst for last. "Human war songs," she ordered. The speakers erupted with the sound of human voices raised in battle cries. Ancient war chants from a dozen different cultures mixed with modern military songs and the screams of humans in combat. The sounds carried something the Kreks couldn't comprehend. Individual will choosing violence, separate minds deciding to fight rather than flee. The hive mind recoiled from the concept. Individual choice was antithetical to everything the Kreks represented. They were one mind in many bodies, perfect unity of purpose. But these sounds suggested creatures that chose to be violent, who found strength in their separation rather than weakness. The psychological assault had an unexpected effect. Several Kreks ships began attacking each other, their shared consciousness fracturing under the strain of concepts it couldn't process. The perfect unity of the hive mind started developing cracks. Chen watched the chaos spread through the enemy fleet and gave the order for Phase 3. All right, people. Time to get physical. Deploy the ramming drones. The Retribution had entered the system carrying mining equipment, massive drilling platforms designed to bore through asteroids. Chen's crew had made some modifications. The drilling platforms were now guided missiles, each one carrying enough momentum to punch through a small moon. But instead of aiming for the Krek ships directly, Chen targeted the debris fields created by the bacterial infections. As the bioships' hulls decomposed, they left behind clouds of metal and mineral compounds, the inorganic skeletons that had supported the living tissue. The ramming drones slammed into these debris clouds at tremendous speed, turning metal fragments into high-velocity projectiles. The Krek ships found themselves caught in artificial meteor storms, their remaining hull integrity shredded by pieces of their own dead vessels. "They're trying to retreat," Webb reported. "The larger ships are pulling back toward the system edge." "Let them try," Chen said. "Activate the gravity mines." The Retribution had been dropping modified mining charges throughout the system during its approach, but these weren't explosive devices. They were gravitational manipulators, designed to create small but intense gravity wells. As the fleeing Krek ships passed over them, the devices activated. The effect was devastating. Ships designed to move smoothly through space suddenly found themselves caught in gravitational whirlpools. Their organic navigation systems, already compromised by bacterial infection and psychological trauma, couldn't compensate for the sudden changes in local space-time. Krek's vessels crashed into each other, their coordination completely destroyed. Some were torn apart by gravitational stress. Others spun helplessly, trapped in artificial gravity wells that prevented escape. The Coalition fleet, watching from a safe distance, could barely comprehend what they were seeing. A single human ship was systematically destroying a force that had conquered 12 star systems. But they weren't doing it through superior firepower or advanced technology. They were doing it by turning the Kreks' own strengths against them. "Captain," Veltar's voice came over the communication channel. "What happens to the survivors?" Chen looked at the tactical display, where scattered Krek ships were still trying to escape the system. Most were crippled, their biohulls failing, their hive-mind connection disrupted by psychological trauma. "There won't be any survivors," she said quietly. The final phase of Chen's plan was the most brutal. The Retribution moved through the debris field like a mechanical shark, hunting down damaged Krek's vessels. But instead of simply destroying them, Chen's crew boarded the ships. Webb led the boarding parties, wearing environmental suits that protected him from the bacterial infections ravaging the Krek's bioships. His teams moved through the dying vessels, collecting samples, studying the enemy's technology, learning everything they could about Krek's biology and psychology. It wasn't just intelligence gathering, it was a message. The few Krek ships that managed to escape would carry reports back to the main swarm. They would tell the collective consciousness that humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They studied them. They learned from them. They took apart everything that made the enemy dangerous and figured out how to use it for themselves. Santos worked frantically in the Retribution's laboratories, analyzing the captured biotechnology. "Captain, this is incredible. Their organic computing systems could revolutionize our own technology, and their biomass processing—" "Careful, Riley," Chen warned. "That technology comes with a price. Every advancement they made was paid for with the lives of entire species." But she didn't order him to stop. That was the thing about humans that made other species uncomfortable. They could feel horror at their enemies' actions while still being willing to learn from them. They could condemn the Kreks for consuming entire civilizations while studying the very techniques that made such consumption possible. The battle ended 6 hours after it began. The Zephyr 7 system was littered with the debris of Krek's bioships, their organic hulls reduced to floating colonies of Earth bacteria. The gravitational anomalies would take weeks to dissipate. The psychological echoes of human war songs would haunt the local space for years. Chen stood on her bridge, looking out at the destruction. Her crew worked around her, cataloging their captures, analyzing their samples, preparing reports that would change humanity's understanding of biotechnology forever. "Coalition Fleet, this is Captain Chen," she broadcast. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. The system is secure." There was a long pause before Veltar responded. "Captain, what just happened here?" Chen considered her answer carefully. "We showed the Kreks what happens when they threaten a species under human protection. They wanted to be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. We taught them the difference between being dangerous and being apex predators." She looked at the tactical display, where the few escaping Kreks ships were limping toward the hyperspace exit point. They would carry word of this defeat back to the main swarm. They would tell the collective consciousness that humans fought wars in ways the hive mind couldn't comprehend or counter. "Fair warning, Ambassador," Chen added. "This is just the beginning. The main swarm will come looking for revenge. When they do, they'll find out that everything we just did to their advanced fleet was US being gentle." Outside the Retribution's viewports, Earth bacteria continued consuming the organic remains of Kreks bioships, turning the enemy's corpses into fuel for their own reproduction. It was a perfect metaphor for human warfare. Even in death, their enemies served human purposes. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about the difference between being civilized and being safe. 3 weeks after the battle at Zephyr 7, Ambassador Veltar stood in the cargo bay of the UES Retribution and tried not to vomit. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of chemicals, decay, and something else that made her instincts scream danger. Around her, human crew members worked with casual efficiency, processing materials that no civilized species would dare to touch. "Careful with that sample," Santos called out to a technician handling what looked like a piece of living metal. "It's still trying to network with other Kreks biotech. We don't want it establishing a communication link." Veltar watched in horror as the human crew dissected pieces of Krek ships like they were performing surgery on corpses. Which, she realized, was exactly what they were doing. The humans had harvested everything: hull fragments, biocomputers, organic processors, even samples of the collective consciousness itself. "Is this legal?" she asked Captain Chen, who was examining a datapad covered in biological readings. Chen looked up with those winter storm eyes. "Define legal." "We're not technically violating any galactic treaties because this isn't officially a galactic operation. Earth's involvement here is classified as humanitarian assistance, not military action. But you're studying their technology, learning from it." "Of course we are. You don't win wars by being stupid." Chen set down her data pad and faced Veltar directly. "Every piece of Kreks biotech we analyze makes us better prepared to fight them next time. Every biological sample we study teaches us more about their weaknesses. This isn't just scavenging, it's intelligence gathering." Veltar felt sick. "The Kreks were a sentient species. This feels like..." "Like what? Grave robbing?" Chen's voice hardened. "Let me show you something." She led Veltar to a workstation where Webb was analyzing what looked like organic memory storage. The massive man's scarred hands moved delicately over the alien technology, extracting data with surgical precision. "Marcus, show the ambassador what we found in the neural networks." Webb activated a holographic display that made Veltar gasp. Images flooded the air around them, memories extracted from the Kreks' collective consciousness. She saw worlds burning, species being consumed, children being absorbed into the hive mind, billions of voices screaming as their individuality was stripped away and fed to the collective. "This is what the Kreks did to 12 star systems," Chen said quietly. "Every person they consumed became part of their memory banks. Their experiences, their knowledge, their terror. All of it preserved forever as entertainment for the hive mind." The images continued. Veltar watched entire civilizations disappear, their cultures reduced to data points in the Krex collective. The hive mind didn't just kill, it absorbed everything, making the death of entire species into a form of psychological torture that lasted forever. They kept the memories, Webb explained, his voice emotionless. Every scream, every moment of fear, every desperate prayer for rescue. The Krex found it amusing. Veltar turned away from the display. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand what we prevented," Chen said. "The Krex weren't just going to kill your people. They were going to make your deaths last forever. Every Zephyrian child they consumed would have spent eternity as part of their collective, experiencing the moment of consumption over and over again. But that doesn't justify what? Studying their technology, learning their weaknesses." Chen's voice rose slightly. "Ambassador, the main Krex fleet is still out there. They're going to come for revenge. And when they do, every piece of information we gather here could save millions of lives." Santos looked up from his workstation. "Captain, I've isolated the bio-neural pathways they use for collective communication. If we can synthesize a counteragent, we might be able to disrupt their hive mind completely." "Good work. What do you need?" "More samples, preferably from living subjects." Veltar stared at him. "Living subjects? We captured 3 Krex drones during the boarding actions," Chen explained. "They're being held in isolation chambers. Santos needs to study their neural activity to understand how the hive mind actually functions." "You're experimenting on prisoners?" The cargo bay went quiet. Every human in the room turned to look at Veltar, and she suddenly felt like a small prey animal surrounded by predators. "Ambassador," Chen said slowly, "let me explain something about human morality. We don't experiment on prisoners. We study captured enemies to protect our allies. The Krex drones aren't suffering. They're unconscious and isolated from their collective. But the information we gain from studying them could prevent the consumption of entire species." Webb spoke without looking up from his work. "The Krex don't take prisoners. They consume everything. Our choice is between studying 3 unconscious drones or watching the Coalition get eaten." Veltar felt the weight of moral complexity crushing down on her. Everything the humans did violated some principle of civilized warfare, but everything they violated those principles to prevent was infinitely worse. "How do you live with yourselves?" she asked quietly. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "We don't have to live with ourselves. We just have to live, and make sure other people get to live too." She gestured to a viewport that showed the debris field still floating around Zephyr 7. "Every piece of metal out there represents thousands of Krex drones that will never consume another world. Every biological sample we study brings us closer to understanding how to stop the main fleet. If that makes us monsters, then we're monsters who protect the people we care about. But the cost..." "The cost of what? Having nightmares about the things we've done? Knowing that we've crossed lines civilized species won't cross?" Chen's smile was sharp and cold. "Ambassador, the Krex have consumed 12 star systems, billions of sentient beings. They're planning to consume billions more. If the cost of stopping them is that 43 humans have to carry some moral weight, then that's a bargain." Veltar looked around the cargo bay again, seeing it with new eyes. The humans weren't celebrating their victory. They worked with grim efficiency, like doctors performing surgery on a plague victim. They didn't enjoy what they were doing, but they did it anyway because the alternative was worse. "Captain Chen," she said slowly, "what happens when the main Krex fleet arrives?" "We'll be ready for them." Chen activated a tactical display showing the modifications being made to Coalition space. "We're setting up bacterial dispersal networks throughout your territory, psychological warfare broadcasting stations, gravitational minefields. When the Krex come looking for revenge, they're going to find a very different kind of war than they're used to." "And after that?" Chen's expression grew distant. After that, we make sure they never threaten anyone again. Ever. The finality in her voice sent chills down Veltar's spine. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about pest control. Chen's winter storm eyes focused on Veltar again. The Kreks are cancer. They consume everything they touch and leave nothing behind but empty husks. You don't negotiate with cancer. You don't try to rehabilitate it. You cut it out completely. They're still a sentient species. Are they? Webb looked up from his workstation. We've been studying their collective consciousness for weeks. Want to know what we found? Individual Kreks drones have no independent thought, no personal desires, no individual identity. They're biological robots controlled by a central processing network. Santos nodded. The hive mind is sentient, but the individual drones aren't any more aware than your fingernails. Killing a Kreks drone is like cutting your hair. The central organism might notice, but the individual piece doesn't suffer. But the collective consciousness is a parasite that consumes other species' consciousness, Chen finished. Every time the Kreks absorb someone, that person's individuality dies and becomes part of the collective. The hive mind isn't just sentient, it's made up of the stolen sentience of billions of victims. Veltar sat down heavily on a cargo crate. The moral landscape she thought she understood had been completely rewritten. The humans weren't just brutal savages. They were pragmatic surgeons, cutting away a diseased part of the galaxy with ruthless efficiency. How many ships like the Retribution does Earth have? She asked. Dozens, Chen said. Ships crewed by people too dangerous for regular society but too valuable to waste. Pirates who hunt pirates. Soldiers who fight wars that regular military can't touch. Scientists who study things that would drive normal researchers insane. And they all volunteer for this? Most of us don't have anywhere else to go, Webb said quietly. Regular society doesn't know what to do with people like us. We're too violent for civilian life, too unstable for regular military service. But we're perfect for jobs like this. Chen walked to the viewport and looked out at the debris field. Every person on this ship volunteered for what we assumed would be a suicide mission. We had no backup, no support fleet, no guarantee of survival. We came because someone asked for help, and humans don't ignore distress calls. Even from strangers? Even from species you'd never met? Especially from strangers. Chen's reflection in the viewport looked tired. It's easy to help people, you know. It takes something else to help people you've never met, who can't offer you anything in return. Veltar thought about that for a long time. The humans had traveled across the galaxy to fight a war they couldn't win, for people they didn't know, asking for nothing in return. They had violated every principle of civilized warfare and committed acts that would haunt them forever, all to protect strangers. Captain, she said finally, what do you need from the Coalition? Space to work, time to prepare, and the understanding that when this is over, the galaxy is going to be a different place. Chen turned away from the viewport. The Kreks thought they were the apex predators. They were wrong, but now everyone else is going to know what actual apex predators look like. Outside the Retribution, Coalition ships moved through the debris field, beginning the long process of cleanup. But Veltar knew that no amount of cleaning would erase what had happened here. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when, pushed to the edge. She just hoped they would never be pushed that far again. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Kreks advance fleet, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened at Zephyr 7. Ambassador Veltar stood in her new office on Earth's orbital station above the planet's blue, marble surface, reading reports that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The Zephyrian Coalition had not just survived, they had thrived. Their worlds were rebuilding faster than anyone had predicted, protected by a network of human-designed defenses that made invasion virtually impossible. But more importantly, they were no longer alone. The galaxy's perception of the Coalition had changed overnight from doomed refugees to species under human protection. That protection came with implications that Veltar was still learning to navigate. The Altarian Empire has requested a formal meeting, her aide, Scholar Zixtal, reported. They want to discuss mutual defense agreements. Veltar almost laughed. 6 months ago, the Altarians had closed their borders rather than risk helping the coalition. Now they wanted to ally with the species that had somehow convinced humans to fight their wars. What about the Nexus Confederation? They've offered to return all the cultural artifacts they preserved from coalition worlds, free of charge. They're also requesting permission to establish an embassy in coalition space. And the Galactic Council? Zixtal's expression grew complicated. They've officially recognized the coalition's right to employ non-traditional security contractors. It's their way of acknowledging the human presence without actually saying the word human in official documents. Veltar walked to the window that looked down on Earth's surface. From orbit, the planet looked deceptively peaceful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Nothing in the view suggested that this was a Class 12 death world that had produced the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But if you knew what to look for, you could see the signs. Cities that sprawled across entire continents, connected by transport networks that could move armies in hours. Industrial complexes that could build warships faster than most species could design them. And scattered across the planet's surface, training facilities where humans learned to fight wars that other species couldn't imagine. Any word from Captain Chen? Veltar asked. The Retribution departed yesterday for the Outer Rim. Intelligence reports suggest Krek's survivors have been gathering there, trying to rebuild their fleet. Zixtal paused. Captain Chen's final message was brief, cleaning up the remaining infestation. Veltar shivered. She had grown to respect Sarah Chen over the past months, but the humans' casual attitude toward genocide still disturbed her. Chen spoke about exterminating the Kreks the way most people discussed pest control. Necessary, efficient, and completely without emotional weight. The door to her office chimed, and Admiral Marcus Webb entered. The massive human looked strange. In the diplomatic uniform Earth had provided, his scarred hands folded behind his back in a gesture that was probably meant to look peaceful, but somehow managed to appear threatening instead. "Ambassador," he said in his grinding stone voice, "I have the monthly security briefing." Webb had been assigned as Earth's military liaison to the coalition, which was a polite way of saying he was their permanent bodyguard. The human government had made it clear that anyone who threatened the coalition would have to answer to people like Webb. "What's the situation?" Veltar asked. "Quiet. Too quiet." Webb activated a holographic display showing the local galactic region. Pirate activity has dropped by 90% in coalition space. Raiding fleets are avoiding your territory completely. Even the minor conflicts between neighboring species have cooled down. That sounds like good news. It is, but it's also artificial. Everyone's being peaceful because they're afraid of what happens if they're not. Webb highlighted several star systems on the display. These regions used to see regular conflicts. Now they're negotiating instead of fighting, because nobody wants to be the next species that requires human intervention. Veltar studied the display. Peace imposed by fear wasn't really peace at all. It was just violence waiting to happen. "Are we doing the right thing?" she asked quietly. Webb was silent for a long moment. "Define right. Are we saving lives? Yes. Are we preventing wars? Yes. Are we forcing the galaxy to behave better through the implicit threat of overwhelming violence? Also yes. But is that justice? Justice is a luxury for species that have other options." Webb's scarred face showed no emotion. 6 months ago, your people were facing extinction. Today they're safe and rebuilding. If that's not justice, it's at least survival. Veltar's communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display showed Captain Chen's face, broadcast from somewhere in the outer rim. The human looked tired, but satisfied. "Ambassador," Chen said without preamble, "the cleanup operation is complete. The remaining Krex fleet has been neutralized. The species is now functionally extinct." Veltar felt a chill. All of them? Every ship, every drone, every fragment of the collective consciousness. We tracked down the survivors from Zephyr 7 and found their rallying point. They were trying to rebuild their forces using biological samples from previous conquests. Chen's expression never changed. "We made sure they won't be trying again." "How many?" "Approximately 2 million drones across 50 bioships. They never saw us coming." Chen paused. "The Krex swarm is officially extinct as of 1400 hours, standard galactic time." Veltar sat down heavily. 2 million beings, wiped out by a single human ship. The mathematics of destruction were staggering. "Captain," Webb said, "what's your next assignment?" "Patrol duty along the contested frontier. Intelligence suggests there's a rogue AI fleet that's been raiding isolated colonies. Command wants us to investigate." Chen's smile was sharp. "Should be fun." After the transmission ended, Veltar sat in silence for several minutes. Webb waited patiently, his massive frame still as stone. "How many ships like the Retribution are out there?" she finally asked. "Classified, but enough." Webb activated another display, this one showing human ship movements throughout the galaxy. "Patrol vessels, research ships, merchant vessels that carry enough firepower to level small moons. We're everywhere, and we're watching everything. You're policing the galaxy. We're protecting our interests. The Coalition is under human protection now. That makes your enemies our enemies, your threats our threats." Webb's expression was as emotionless as always. The galaxy is learning to be more careful about who it threatens. Veltar thought about the reports she'd been reading. Pirate fleets disbanding rather than risk operating near Coalition space. Aggressive species negotiating peaceful settlements instead of going to war. The galactic community walking softly around anything that might attract human attention. "This can't last," she said. "Eventually, someone is going to challenge you. Someone is going to test whether humans are really as dangerous as everyone thinks." "Probably." Webb seemed unconcerned. "When that happens, we'll remind them why the Krex are extinct." "And what about us? What about the Coalition? Are we truly allies, or are we just pets you're protecting?" Webb considered the question seriously. "Allies, but allies of a species that doesn't make friends the way other species do. Humans form pack bonds. Once you're part of our pack, we'll die before we let anything happen to you. But that protection comes with expectations." "What kind of expectations?" "Loyalty, trust, the understanding that when we ask you to do something, it's because the alternative is worse." Webb's scarred hands moved to rest on the table. "The Coalition is free to make its own decisions, choose its own path. But if those choices threaten human interests or put our people at risk, we'll intervene. And if we want to end the alliance, you can't." Webb's statement was simple and final. "You've seen what we're capable of. You know our methods, our technology, our strategic thinking. Even if we wanted to let you go, we couldn't risk that information falling into the wrong hands." Veltar felt a chill of understanding. The Coalition wasn't just protected by humans. They were bound to them, permanently and irrevocably. They had traded the threat of extinction for the security of permanent oversight. "Are you saying we're prisoners?" "I'm saying your family. Difficult, complicated, sometimes dangerous family, but family nonetheless." Webb stood to leave. "The difference is that prisoners want to escape. Family wants to survive together." After he left, Veltar stood at the window again, watching Earth turn slowly beneath the orbital station. Somewhere down there, humans were training for wars that hadn't started yet, building weapons for enemies they hadn't met, preparing for threats that existed only in worst-case scenarios. Her communication console chimed again, this time with a message from Coalition Space. A new distress call had been received. A small mining colony in an isolated system under attack by unknown raiders. The message was brief and desperate. "Please help us. We don't have anywhere else to turn." Veltar looked at the message for a long time, then activated her response channel. "Message received and forwarded to human patrol forces. Assistance is en route. Hang on, help is coming." She closed the channel and smiled slightly. 6 months. Ego, receiving that message would have filled her with despair. Another tragedy she was powerless to prevent. Now it was just another problem that would be solved with overwhelming human violence. The galaxy had learned an important lesson in the ruins of the Krex swarm. There were worse things than being afraid of humans. There was being the kind of species that made humans decide you needed to be stopped. Outside the window, Earth continued. Its slow rotation, a blue marble hiding the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ships like the Retribution patrolled the void, carrying their dangerous cargo of hope to desperate corners of the galaxy. The age of human protection had begun. For better or worse, the galaxy would never be the same.